I came across the disappearance of Bobby Panknin, who was 4 years old at the time when he disappeared from Deep Lake in the northeast of Washington on the 3rd of August 1963. At the time, Bobby was on a family camping trip at this place, and on that day, his mother had taken him and his two brothers, 6 and 10, on a short hike that didn't stray too far from the campsite. It's not completely clear what happened on this hike, but Bobby somehow managed to get separated from his mother and brothers. 2 days into the search effort, authorities had absolutely no idea what could have possibly happened in this incident. A Spokane boy was the object of a widespread search Monday in the rugged countryside near here. Searchers probed the waters of Deep Lake searching for the boy who was reported missing Saturday. There is absolutely no clue to his disappearance, Stevens County Sheriff A.E. Halter said. Bloodhounds have failed to turn up the Tots trail. At the time of his disappearance, there was nothing untoward that seemed to take place. The family never heard Bobby shout or anything like that, and there was no evidence to suggest that an animal was responsible, which we'll get more into in a moment. First, something odd. The 5th day of searching failed to turn up any trace of Bobby. The Spokane boy was barefoot and wearing a swimsuit at the time. Hopes were raised earlier Wednesday with the discovery of a youngster's footprint. A bloodhound from Seattle found the print. The 80-pound animal named Caesar was unable to uncover any trail. This footprint was assumed and treated to have been left behind by Bobby. It seems to have been a singular print with no others surrounding it, which was odd, and by that same token, seemed to have been alone. It's important to note too that where the print was found was off the beaten track, and searchers were armed with power tools to help them make their way through all the long tangles of this area. It seems that after the dog failed to pick up any further trace after this print was left, hope began to drain from the situation, and Sheriff Halter basically went on to say that he had no ideas left in how to deal with this. In the face of diminishing hope, the search goes on and will continue to at least Sunday. We're nearing the point of desperation. We don't know where to look next or what approach to use, the sheriff said in describing the search. The sheriff went on to say that the search area had already been widened and many more members brought in. But the area was so rugged that it was just unbelievable that little Bobby could have gotten too far away on foot, alone. Now, this is where people began to blame bears or another animal again, and it seems that the sheriff and search leaders already knew that this wasn't the case because it had been explored once, but to put it to bed. Some search detachments with bear hunting dogs went into the hills yesterday. Halter said the move should prove or disprove speculation that some sort of wild animal might have taken him. These efforts provided no evidence whatsoever that a bear was even in this area. It was also noted that if this had been the result of an animal, it would be highly likely that the family would have heard the event take place. Now, the sheriff said something interesting. Instead of disappearing on foot, the sheriff begins to contemplate a disappearance from above. I could go along with the possibility that he could have been taken by an eagle, but it's difficult to accept the boy's disappearance by either a bear or a cougar, said the sheriff. That's the first time I think I've ever seen the search leaders blame an eagle or being taken from above. But when you examine the details, you can begin to see why. Bobby disappeared right under everyone's noses. There was no sound or anything to suggest something was awry. For that reason, it becomes difficult to make the case that someone took him. Animal predation would have been obvious, as very clear, unmistakable, and frankly horrible evidence of that kind is left behind which was never found. That leaves the sheriff at the eagle, but even with that, I'm almost certain you'd have heard that go down and a shout or something like that from Bobby, but none of that ever happened. These were the final words on the incident. A day-long search by more than 200 persons failed yesterday to find a trace of Bobby, and authorities reluctantly announced that the official search is over. No trace of Bobby was found in a week of searching. "It's all over now," announced Sheriff Halter. "Anyone who wants to can come up and look, but the official search is over." This is one of those rare incidents in which not only was Bobby, or even a hint of him, ever found, but the authorities and the searchers alike had absolutely no idea what took place that day. They seemed to rule out everything, which only served to make the incident all the more confusing. It seems that the lone footprint only served to make it worse in that regard, because the dogs weren't able to follow it anywhere. Perhaps that was another reason that led the sheriff to the remarks about going up with an eagle. Whatever the case may be, I can't imagine that we'll ever know now. And that's also the end of the paper trail, so let's move on to the next disappearance. Yehudi Pryor was 2 years old when he disappeared from Vancouver Island in Canada while out during a berry picking trip with his family. The Pryors lived in a cabin near Wild Deer Lake, and the berry patch was only a short distance away from the home. This was an odd incident because he and his family were interacting and having fun all day while out in the berry bushes. But at around 3 p.m. on the 23rd of September 1974, his parents realised that they hadn't heard him for around 5 minutes, but each thought that he was with the other just a short distance away. It seems that the father made his way over to his wife, which is where they realised that Yehudi had vanished. There wasn't an immediate panic, though I'm sure that the pair became nervous as they began searching and poking around the bushes. But all they could hear was an absolute silence apart from the wind. They called out for Yehudi and walked around the general area they had all just been together, but they never received a reply nor saw anything to indicate where he might have gone or what might have happened. Using a police tracking dog from Nanaimo, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police searched fruitlessly until dark Tuesday for Yehudi, who was with his parents on a berry picking excursion when he disappeared. Aside from the accidental pun there, when the dogs arrived, they initially picked up his scent but weren't able to follow it from the area. I also find this a little bit questionable. At about 3 p.m. Monday, the parents realised Yehudi had disappeared. They conducted their own search of the area until after dark and notified the Shawnigan Lake RCMP department just before midnight. That, to me, seems like an absolutely awful decision that they would hold off calling the authorities until over 9 hours after the initial disappearance. It's difficult to understand how that even happened. What should have happened is straight after the initial failed search effort, the authorities should have been notified straight away. RCMP officers and a group of volunteers Saturday continued their search in rough bush near Shawnigan Lake. The authorities said the hunt continued throughout the day but failed to turn up any sign of Yehudi. The search began on Tuesday and by Thursday had as many as 65 volunteers taking part. 6 tracking dogs and an RCMP helicopter were also used in the search. At this point, suspicions began to grow that Yehudi had been taken from the area. Authorities seem to believe that these tracking dogs had picked up Yehudi's scent at the berry picking site, so they knew he'd been there, but they couldn't figure out how or where he'd gone after this. The parents said that they thought that they heard a car stop nearby a logging road not far from their cabin. The only problem with this though is that there wasn't a line of sight between the family and the logging road, so even if someone had stopped there, they wouldn't have known if there was anyone even in the bushes at that time. This idea was quickly dismissed because in the next article, published 3 days after the last, this was stated: the unclothed body of Yehudi was found Sunday afternoon after a 6-day search in the rugged bushland west of Shawnigan Lake. Yehudi had apparently passed away due to fatigue and cold the night of the 23rd, which was the day of the disappearance. His body was found about 4 miles from where he went missing. This introduced a point of confusion because search leaders weren't sure how he'd managed to travel 4 miles in such a short time span in this rugged terrain. But this idea of being taken by someone else was ruled out because other than fine scratches all over his body, he hadn't sustained any injuries. Secondly, and this wasn't brought up again, but why weren't the dogs able to find and follow his scent in this instance? It seems that initially, this added to the idea that he had been removed from the area, thus giving the dogs nothing to follow. When Yehudi was found, he had removed his t-shirt and shoes, though it's not clear if he'd removed the shoes with his family before disappearing. According to the search leaders, Yehudi had wandered off over a small ridge into a valley and headed to Holt Creek. He said that footprints were found in the area and they petered out, but gave them a focal point to search, and after fanning out in the area, they found his body in a shallow pool beside the creek. Interestingly, after this event took place, the leader of the Conservative Party at the time, Dr. Scott Wallace, demanded a full explanation as to what happened here. This was provoked by 2 other instances alongside Yehudi in which young people had passed away due to apparent neglect. But he effectively said that the public must be provided with a full explanation as to what happened in these instances, and pointed to this case because it was less clear as to what happened. Yehudi's case was different to the other 2 being referred to because there was no real evidence to point in any direction other than he just wandered off, but there were many people that were skeptical about him travelling 4 miles in such a short time span and why he wasn't found sooner. It seems that Dr. Wallace's words may have had an effect here because towards the end of the month of October, Yehudi's autopsy was reported by the press. The autopsy revealed that Yehudi was well nourished and well built. Corporal Herbert Schmidt of Shawnigan Lake said there were numerous fine scratches all over the body. There was no evidence of decomposition, no food in the stomach, and the findings are consistent with exposure. 2 constables who conducted investigations after finding the body indicated there was no evidence of foul play. There were a few odd things though. Schmidt said he told Pryor that a search would begin immediately. He testified that Pryor said he did not believe a search was necessary, that he felt Yehudi was alright, and he would make the search himself. Next day, at 11:45 AM, Pryor returned and said that he couldn't find his son. The body was found approximately 150 feet from a gravel logging road in a densely wooded area, with no trail between the road and the place the body was found. A picture showed that the head was above the waterline. The body was lying in a pool of water approximately 5 inches deep with a temperature of 47 degrees. That was the end of the paper trail. It's odd that the father initially felt a search wasn't necessary despite the fact that Yehudi had been missing for 9 hours alone in what was now cold and rugged terrain. It's also odd that Yehudi would enter the small body of water the way it seems he must have, and that the dogs weren't able to follow the scent away from the berry picking site. While there was no evidence that another person had been involved here, it seems that many people simply didn't believe that. The Pryor family ended up moving home, though a reason wasn't given as to why. Perhaps now awful memories, and potentially a community that may have been suspicious, it's not made clear. Nor was it made clear what some may have felt the alternative explanation was, but it sure seems that waiting as long as the father did before reporting it, and then saying that he was going to search alone, can't have helped one bit. In any case, I can see why Dr. Wallace demanded a full explanation of this disappearance. What are your thoughts? Now, let's talk about Richard Tom Sudden, who was 3 years old when he disappeared from their rural home around 10 miles north of the small town of Covelo in California. Richard was playing in the garden with their family dog when this took place. It's not clear what happened in the moments leading up to the disappearance, but let's have a look at an article released by the press at the time. Sheriff's deputies directed military and civilian groups in a search through Wild Sierra country for Richard. Late Thursday, the lad's dog, a constant companion came home. One of the boy's mittens was found a quarter-mile from the house on a steep hillside. Searchers said they could hardly believe that the child could have climbed to the ledge. So, things get interesting right off the bat, because first of all, Richard and his dog went missing at the same time, with the dog coming home many hours later, alone. Richard's mitten was also found in an area that all involved came to the conclusion that he cannot possibly have reached alone. The only problem, which we'll get to in a moment, was the fact that there was absolutely no evidence at all that would indicate that a third party took him. Searchers found footprints which might be those of Richard, who disappeared 3 days ago in the wild mining country of the Sierra Nevadas. The prints were relatively fresh, the searchers said, and led to a ravine about half a mile from Richard's summer home. The family dog sniffed at the footprints, followed them a short distance, and then stopped, confused. The prints were near the spot where one of Richard's red and blue mittens was found by one of the 200 persons trampling the woods and hills for sight of him. Although some relatives feared that the lad may have been taken, officials and the boy's mother did not hold to that theory. District Attorney Alfred R. Lowy said, "There is nothing in my mind to support the idea that he'd been taken by a third party. This is just a lost child." The sheriff then came forth and stated the exact same thing. And there does seem to be good reason for this. Richard's footprints were completely alone. Now, it's easy enough to say that Richard just got lost. However, no one present could propose a decent explanation for any of these factors. Other tracking dogs came in too, and they also could not follow the scent of the fresh prints that seemingly led to a ravine and disappeared. Because the prints were fresh, this must have meant that Richard was getting around and somehow at the same time managing to evade the hundreds of people who were out looking for him. After repeated searches of the ravine failed, a couple of Russian shepherd dogs were brought in who, according to the Modesto Bee and News Herald, had been involved in the finding of almost 100 lost persons, and their handlers were confident that they would find Richard, given the evidence that was left behind. Needless to say at this point, but despite the accolades given to these dogs, they too were just as confused as the family dog, who could follow the scent no further. It's as if the scent just suddenly ended at the ravine. These searches would meet their unsuccessful conclusion and were brought to a stop when no further evidence could be found. The FBI ended up becoming interested in this disappearance and they began to investigate it privately. But as far as I can tell, this never led to any form of conclusion. This whole incident is just bizarre when you start to think about it, because days into the search, the searchers found the fresh prints. So if Richard had been taken by a third party, what were they doing sticking around for days afterwards in an area filled with hundreds of people searching? That doesn't really make much sense. That seems to have spurred on the comments from the sheriff and others who stated that Richard was lost as opposed to taken. I'm not sure what was going on with the prints and the dogs either. This was never expanded upon. We're practically at the end of the paper trail now, and despite all this time afterwards, Richard was never found. Now, moving on, there unfortunately wasn't a lot of information about this next disappearance, and it's one of those where you'd really like to hear more about it. This happened to a boy called Richard Herman, who was 6 years old, and he got lost on the Blue Mountains of Oregon on the 30th of August, 1959. He and his mother were staying at the Emigrant State Park in which the mountain resides. And Richard was having a great time because there were plenty of other kids his age to play with. Well, on that day, a bunch of them decided that they wanted to play hide and seek. Richard was still in his pajamas, but was so excited and wanted to go play with the others that he didn't properly change out of them. He just put a pair of jeans and a jacket over the top. During this game, it seems that Richard hid just a little too well because no one could find him and he quite literally managed to disappear. This sparked a massive search effort and thankfully he was found, but not without some amount of surprise. and he was only found because one of the searchers deviated massively from the search radius. Richard, 6 years old, was lost overnight in the Blue Mountains, about 20 miles east of here. Was found Sunday, tired and tear-stained, cold and hungry. Sheriff's Deputy J.H. Brown said the sturdy youngster had wandered 9 miles through bushy timberland from the state park where he became lost. Richard didn't seem to have much to say about his ordeal, probably due to shock, and there were no further articles. But 9 miles is no joke. That's quite remarkable for a 6-year-old to reach in near freezing weather, overnight, in the dark, in rugged forestry and mountainous terrain. He got so very lucky here because it's a miracle that he was even found. Everyone was highly impressed at this distance, and many found it odd that he wandered so very far away. But there were no further articles on this case sadly, but I thought it might have been worth a quick mention. Now, there was a disappearance that I covered last year that fits in well within this category. Evan Thompson was 8 years old when he disappeared on a camping trip northwest of Cannon City in Colorado. The campground was at an elevation of over 7,000 feet and was described as being littered with steep limestone cliffs and narrow ravines. Evan himself had attention deficit disorder, and I'm not sure what the occasion was, but Evan was with family friends and a teacher. The first report comes 3 days into the search effort. Evan disappeared on the 27th of May 2006, and the first article I could find was written on the 30th. Searchers on Monday were hopeful that Evan could survive the elements 3 days after he disappeared while on a camping trip. Crews from 5 counties, the military, and the Civil Air Patrol were searching for Evan, who was last seen about 9:30 AM Saturday while camping. Searchers found fresh prints of the boy's Spider-Man shoes Sunday, and the area he was going was not interrupted by the sheer drop-offs. The land just sloped away over there. For the life of me, I don't know why he hasn't turned up. He's an 8-year-old kid. He's not going to be mobile much longer because he'll be too weak, said Steve Sperry, member of the El Paso County Search and Rescue Team. Just for extra clarity, it wasn't just professional search and rescuers involved, but the Air Force and National Guard were out looking too. Now, thankfully, Evan was found, but it wasn't without its peculiarities. Let's have a look. Evan was found alive after 4 days in a rugged area dotted with pine and juniper trees and creased by steep cliffs and narrow ravines. A search team on ATVs found Evan in an area called Hole in the Wall Gulch, almost 5 miles from where the boy wandered away from. The searchers who found him said that he was in exceptionally good condition, which was surprising to them. Evan was found at 4:20 PM in an area so remote and rugged. It took rescuers nearly 1.5 hours to bring him out to a staging area. Weirdly, searchers said that they didn't know how Evan had managed to reach this location, as it was 5 miles away from the campsite. And of course, you can't walk in a straight line in these areas, so it was estimated that he had likely walked approximately double that to get there. Evan was found inside a cave and didn't remember much about his ordeal. One report also stated that he was missing a shoe but couldn't remember losing it. In the end, and while there isn't much more in the way of reporting, at least he was found, and we can end on a good note. With that, I'd just like to take the time to thank you for watching, and a big thank you to the patrons who've been running around and disappearing on the screen. If you found the video interesting, then please do leave a like, hit the bell, and subscribe if you haven't already. If not, then feel free to leave a dislike. I'm just looking for your honest opinion either way. I hope that you've had a great day or evening, depending on where you are, and I'll see you in the next one. Be safe, guys. Peace.